They gave her the worst assignment on the roster. Not because she was unqualified, not because she was low-ranked. They gave it to her because no one expected anyone to come back from it. And she was the one person no one knew how to say no to. I was the alien officer assigned to observe her. I had a clipboard, a mandate, and a very clear set of evaluation criteria developed over 40 years of interspecies coalition field doctrine. I'd, in other I mean words, absolutely no idea what I was looking at. Her file said, field operative, 6 years active, commendations for conduct under fire, 2 disciplinary flags for insubordination, 1 note, handwritten, which is unusual, that said only, don't underestimate. I underestimated her. Everyone does, I think. That's part of how she works, because she doesn't look like what She moves like someone who has forgotten she's supposed to be afraid. She sleeps in hostile environments the way most species sleep in their nests, not peacefully, but completely. She laughs at the wrong moments, goes quiet at the wrong moments. When the situation turns impossible, she gets this look on her face that I still don't have a word for. Not determination, which not rage. Something older than both. I've filed 41 field reports in my career. I've documented resource conflicts, extraction failures, 3 first contact incidents, and 1 event classified so deeply it doesn't officially exist. I've never filed a report like the one I'm about to give you. This isn't a performance review, and this is a record of the 6 days. I spent watching Sergeant Adaeze Ihejirika dismantle every assumption I'd about what a soldier is supposed to be, and what survival is supposed to cost. The scars were always there. We just weren't looking at the right ones. The first thing she did when we landed in the Kathara Basin was check the wind, not with instruments, not with her suit's environmental overlay, which was still booting, still cycling through the handshake protocols. That take 40 seconds on a good day and longer when the atmosphere has the kind of particulate density Kathara is famous for. She just raised her hand, which fingers spread, held it there for a moment like she was testing bathwater. Then she adjusted her position by about 3 degrees and said, "We've got maybe 2 hours before the dust front hits." I looked at my instruments. My instruments said, "Look, 4 hours." My instruments, it turned out, were reading the wrong layer. I didn't know that yet. I noted the discrepancy, time-stamped it, hour 0007, day 1, basin arrival, human operative contradicts sensor data, and kept moving. That's my habit. I timestamp. Plus, it's a compulsion more than a method, a leftover from my early career when I spent 2 years embedded with a quorum observation team and learned that the only thing standing between a useful report and a useless one is when, exactly, you noticed something. Everything gets a timestamp, even pretty much things I don't understand yet, especially those the mission was straightforward, which is the kind of thing I apparently still say with a straight face. A coalition relay station, abandoned 3 months prior when Kathara's surface became contested territory, had been reactivated. Something, honestly, was broadcasting, on old frequencies. Coalition High Command wanted to know what, and they wanted someone to go look at it who was expendable enough to send without a full support package, skilled. Enough to be fair, actually get there. And this is the part of the briefing that I keep returning to, adaptable enough to handle whatever they found. Sergeant Ihejirika had been available. I'd been assigned to observe and evaluate whether the human integration protocol warranted expansion, which meant I was there to take notes. She was there to do the work. We had a 4-person team. Myself, Veth Solan, Second Assessor, Tripelian Oversight Corps, and yes, I know that title means almost nothing operationally, which is precisely why they gave it to someone who was mostly going to stand at the back and write things down. With us, Corporal Denny Kowalski, Human, Weapons, and Breach, who had the particular effect of someone. That finds most things faintly amusing and the rest of things extremely amusing. A Halvari engineer named Shress, compact and quick and deeply unhappy about the assignment, who communicated discomfort primarily through the pattern of clicks his secondary throat made when he was agitated. And Ihejirika, and I hadn't spent significant time with humans before this. Some diplomatic secondments, a transit overlap once on Meridian Station, the kind of ambient exposure that gives you conversational shorthand without any real understanding. I knew the broad strokes. Plus, I knew they were a warmer-blooded species than average, that they spoke in subtext more than direct statement, that they had evolved on a world that had done its level best to kill everything on it for a few billion years and only partially succeeded. I did not know what that actually looked like in practice. Hour 1, we're moving through the basin's northern approach. The terrain is broken shale and wind-carved ridges, visibility at roughly 200 meters, the air carrying a low mineral smell that my olfactory senses translate as iron-rich erosion product. That I, keep instinctively reading as blood, because the translation algorithm uses reference points from my own biology, and my biology is unhelpfully dramatic. Ihejirika is on point. She moves differently than I expected. Plus, there's no for what it's worth. I wasted energy. She doesn't scan the way trained operatives from most species scan. The deliberate sweep, eyes moving in tracked patterns, checking assigned quadrants. She moves, and she's already looking at the thing she needs to look at, like her attention is pulled rather than directed. Kowalski falls in behind her at a spacing that I can tell is habitual between them. Not standard coalition formation, tighter, adjusted for exactly how she moves. Shress is behind me, clicking. How kind of far is the relay station from here? I ask. 7 kilometers, Ihejirika says. She doesn't look back. At current pace. 90 minutes. Less if the shale holds. I check my overlay. I was about to say 94. In my opinion, I close my overlay. Timestamp, hour 1, 14. Human operative estimates transit time without instruments. Margin of error, under 5 minutes. Note for report. We stop at a ridge overlooking the middle basin when Ihejirika holds up a fist. Everyone stops. She goes still in a way that I don't have good language for. It's not tension, it's the opposite, like she's turned off everything that isn't listening. Shress's clicking stops, and even Kowalski goes quiet, and Kowalski had been making low comments about the situation for the better part of an hour. Nothing important, just the human habit of narrating ambient experience. 40 seconds. Then Ihejirika says, "There are 3 of them on the eastern ridge. HFY, I think. They've been there since we crested the approach." I look at the eastern ridge. I cannot see anything. Plus, "You can see them from here?" Shress asks, and his secondary throat clicks twice. "No," she says. "But something scattered the ground feeders on that slope about 20 minutes ago, and nothing's gone back. Something's still there." She pauses. "Also, there's sort of a reflection off something that's not rock. Could be equipment, could be nothing." I scan the eastern ridge. My sensors confirm 3 heat signatures, partially shielded, approximately 600 meters. I add a timestamp, and then I add a note. Human operative detected contacts 6 minutes before sensors confirmed. Method: behavioral observation of secondary fauna and passive visual anomaly. No technology involved. Plus, then I add a second note under that because my reports are supposed to be objective, but I also believe in accuracy. I'm not sure I've ever observed this before. The HFY aren't allied with anything in particular, which is a diplomatic way of saying they take work from whoever's paying, and Cathara is their territory regardless of what the coalition says about contested jurisdiction. They're watching us. Whether that's territorial instinct or hired observation, I cannot yet determine. Ihejirika determines it before I finish the thought. "They're not moving to intercept," she says. "They'd have done it already if they were going to. Someone paid them to watch." "Watch who?" I ask. "Watch what comes back out of the station." She starts moving again, angling slightly west, putting a ridge between us and the eastern slope. Which means someone already knows we're here, and which means we should move faster. I'm still processing the implication chain on that when I realize she's already 20 meters ahead and Kowalski is following her and Shress is clicking rapidly and I'm standing alone on the ridge with my timestamp log open. I close it and follow. The relay station had been a quorum installation originally, repurposed by Coalition Logistics, which meant it was built in. The quorum-style look, low to the terrain, featureless from the outside, designed to look like nothing anyone would want. It had succeeded, which it looked like a bunker someone had given up on. The actually broadcast signal had been on for 18 days. Automated, our analysts thought, and a loop. The kind of thing that happens when a system doesn't get a shutdown command and keeps running on auxiliary power, pinging the dark. Except the signal had changed. 3 days ago. That was in the briefing packet. I guess, flagged it and changed how. The, to be fair, response changed in ways consistent with intentional modification, which is the kind of answer that technically contains information. The exterior door was sealed, which Ihejirika looked at it for about 4 seconds, then looked at Kowalski. "It's been opened from the outside," she said. "Recently, the seal compound's still soft at the edges." Kowalski crouched, looked, nodded. "Yeah, someone came in. Maybe 12 hours ago." "You can determine that from seal compound texture?" I ask. "The compound sets at a predictable rate given local temperature," Ihejirika says. "I guess it's not precise, but it's close enough." Shress makes a sound. Not a click. Something longer. That his species uses when they're reluctant to say what they're actually thinking. "So, TBH, there's someone inside." "Probably." "Then we should go in," Ihejirika says. Shress's secondary throat goes into a rapid sequence. "That seems... If they're hostile, they already know we're here. If they're not hostile, we need to know what they found." She looks at Shress with an expression I can only describe as patient in the way that has already stopped arguing. "The Kethvari are watching the exits. We don't know who paid them. We have maybe 90 minutes before that dust front hits and we're stuck here anyway." She tilts her head toward the door. "So." There's a moment. Shress clicks twice. It sounds like resignation. We go in, see which the interior was dark, in the way that hasn't thing to do with lighting. The backup strips were functional, throwing the corridors in a flat amber that was fine technically but felt like moving, through the inside of something that had been dead for a while. The equipment was still running, and you could feel it in the floor, a low cycling hum that the structure conducted through its supports. And the signal was coming from the main array room, down a corridor that my overlay said was 30 meters but felt longer. Someone had been through here, recently. There were signs, a panel opened and carefully closed, a cable rerouted, a data terminal with fresh fingerprints on the input surface. Ihejirika stopped it, kind of. Each one looked, moved on. She didn't call them out. She was building something in her head. And I was trying to build it behind her. From the fragments, I guess, she left, like following a sentence that's already 3 words ahead of me. The array room door was closed, but not sealed. Ihejirika held up a fist. We stopped, which she listened. Then she knocked. Not tactically. Not a soldier's knock. The sharp 2 rap that means announce yourself before I breach. She knocked like she was at a door. 3 even knocks. The kind, well, of thing you do when you think someone inside might be scared. I guess I timestamp it. Basically, hour 3:47. Operative knocks on door of potentially occupied hostile structure. From inside, silence. Then, in a language my translator needed a full 3 seconds to process. I'm not armed. Ihejirika opened the door. Inside was a quorum technician, young by their standards, which meant broad-plated and not yet fully chromatic, still showing the pale underplate coloring of someone who hadn't lived long enough to develop full pigmentation. They were, I guess, crouched behind the main array console in a way that was either defensive positioning or simply what they'd found when they stopped moving from fear. Not Kethvari hired, not a trap. A technician who had come back for the equipment and found that the station wasn't as empty as it was supposed to be, either because the signal had drawn someone else here already, or because they'd triggered something they didn't understand when they rerouted the array. They were shaking. That particular fine tremor that means a body has been afraid for a long time and hasn't been allowed to stop yet. Ihejirika crossed, the room. He sat down on the floor in front of the console. Not across from them, not at a tactical angle, just down, cross-legged, below their eyeline, and said, "Hey, for what it's worth, you're okay. What's your name?" The technician stared at her. She waited and, "Vessen," they said, finally. "Actually, okay. Vessen, and how long have you been here?" 2 days. 2 days, she repeated, without judgment. "Okay. Are you hurt?" "No." "Are you hungry?" A pause. Then, "Yes." She pulled a ration pack from her kit, looked at the labeling. And this is the part I keep returning to. Keep timestamping even now in the privacy of my own. Recall, she actually checked the labeling against the quorum dietary notation on her overlay before she handed it over, to make sure it wasn't something that would be harmful to a quorum physiology. She'd looked it up at some point, before the mission, presumably, because someone might need it. Vessen took, I guess, the ration pack with both hands. I'm standing in the doorway with my clipboard, and Kowalski is at my shoulder, and Shress is still in the corridor, and none of us are saying anything because the room has taken on a quality that I don't have a unit of measurement for. The signal had been Vessen's, as it turned out. Not automated. They'd changed it intentionally, trying to draw attention because they were trapped. The Kethvari had sealed the outer door 3 days after their arrival for reasons that were probably territorial and were definitely effective. Vessen had honestly been working with what they had, which was a partial array and the knowledge that eventually someone wouldn't ice a signal that had changed. Someone had. She'd noticed them the second the signal changed, I found out later. It was in her intake notes. She'd flagged it to command, and when the assignment opened, she'd taken it without asking why. I'm still thinking about that. Not why she took a bad assignment. And that part, I think I'm starting to understand. I'm thinking about the fact that she'd already decided what the signal meant before we were even briefed. That while I was reading a packet that said automated systems, probable technical fault, she was reading a pattern and thinking, someone is in there and they need someone to knock on the door. Timestamp, hour 4:02. Human operative correctly assessed hostile signal as distress call from non-hostile actor. I add a note. Then I delete the note because it's not a note kind of thing. Then I write it again. Because I don't know what else to do with it. She knew. The dust front arrived 40 minutes early. And of course it did. I mention this isn't as a complaint. I've filed 17 weather-related incident notes in my career, and I understand that atmospheric modeling on unstable worlds isn't a precise science. But because I'd checked my instruments again at hour 4:30, they had said 90 minutes, and I'd thought privately that Ihejirika had been right about the 2-hour window, but wrong about the dust arriving before her estimate. I should stop thinking things privately. The universe appears to audit them. The station's exterior shutters were rated for Cathara surface conditions, which meant they were rated for conditions as of the original survey, which was 12 years ago, or before the tectonic activity in the southern range began redirecting the basin's primary wind channels. What this meant practically was that the shutters held but the seal on the North Corridor access panel did not, and we spent approximately 20 minutes in a controlled emergency. That involved Kowalski bracing the panel with a piece of equipment housing while Ihejirika welded the frame from the inside with a torch she'd located in a maintenance alcove she had apparently noted and catalogued during our entry. I say apparently because I hadn't seen her do it. She had simply walked directly to the alcove. Shress asked, her afterward, how she'd known where the maintenance equipment was. "It's a quorum station," she said, still wiping carbon scoring off her gloves. Their emergency alcoves are always on the North Corridor. It's in the design standard. You read quorum design standards? She thought about it. I read a lot of things. Shress made the sound, the reluctant one. We were sheltered, which was good. We were also potentially sheltered for the duration. The dust front on Cathara doesn't have a predictable ceiling, which was less good and which meant we now had time, which is sometimes the most dangerous resource a field team can have. It gives people time to talk, and talking gives people time to think. And thinking in a sealed station on a contested world with a quorum technician you just rescued from behind a console is variable. Well, Vesson was doing better. They'd eaten, which had the visible effect of returning something like coherence to their expression. They were still cautious in the way that 2 days of fear produces. So kind of ambient flinching, attention pulled toward exits. But the fine tremor was mostly gone. Ihejirika was at the array console, working, not repairing it, investigating it. She'd asked Vesson basically what the signal anomaly had been, the change that had made our analysts flag the broadcast, and Vesson had explained it, and she'd listened in the focused way she had of listening that made it look like she was actually pulling information in rather than just hearing it. Someone else was in here before you, she said to Vesson. Not the Kethvari, someone with array access. Vesson went still. I was the only one with the access codes for this station. Then either the codes were shared, without your knowledge, or someone got in another way. She pointed at something on the console I couldn't read from the doorway. That input sequence. Basically, recognizable? Vesson looked. Their plate color shifted slightly. Quorum stress response, a subtle darkening at the edges. That's a quorum. Intelligence methodology. Archive retrieval. What was stored in this array? Silence. Vesson. I don't know what I'm allowed to. Someone accessed this station before you arrived, pulled archive data, and then the Kethvari sealed the exits within 72 hours. Ihejirika's voice didn't sharpen. It sort of stayed level in a way that was somehow more serious than sharpening. The people who hired the Kethvari didn't know you were here. They were watching TBH for whoever came to check on the signal after the archive was accessed. That's us. Which means whatever's in this archive is something someone is willing to let people die over. She looked at Vesson. So I need to know what's in it. The silence lasted longer this time. Then Vesson said, Personnel records from the Second Rimwood Campaign. I know the Second Rimwood Campaign. Every member of the Coalition Oversight Corps knows the Second Rimwood Campaign the way you know the location of a scar. Not because you think about it constantly, but because it's always there when you reach for it. 6 years ago, 3 Coalition species and the human forces, a contested sector, a 2-year conflict that officially ended in a negotiated withdrawal and unofficially ended in a negotiated cover. Whose personnel records? Ihejirika said. Are officers who made field decisions that weren't sanctioned. Human officers? Vesson's plates shifted again. Mostly. I think, noted the timestamp. Hour 5:31. Archive contents identified as classified Second Rimwood campaign materials relating to unsanctioned field decisions by Coalition personnel, primarily human. I noted it. I did not say anything. I was standing in the doorway with my clipboard, and I was a second assessor for the Tripelian Oversight Corps. What I was feeling in that moment, I cannot timestamp because it doesn't have a shape. It just has a weight. Because I knew what the Second Rimwood campaign cover meant. I knew what was in those records, in the broad strokes. Field decisions under conditions that Command had created and then retroactively failed to authorize. The kind of thing where the people who made the decisions are the same people who got the job done. And the people who got the job done are the same people who became inconvenient afterward. Someone had accessed this archive, which someone had pulled that data. And we were the team they'd sent to find out why. Kowalski had been quiet for most of this. That in itself, pretty much, wasn't-able. He wasn't a quiet person by default, had a low-level narration habit that filled silence like water fills a container. Observations about the room, the equipment, the quality of Ration Pack 7C versus Ration Pack 7D. The quiet meant he was thinking, and the thinking had made his face do something that wasn't his usual expression. He sat down next to Ihejirika at the console. Not close. A foot of space. The careful distance of someone respecting a boundary they haven't confirmed yet. "It's the 14th Firebase records," he said. Not a question. Ihejirika looked at him. "I was 15th, he said. "Adjacent theatre. Plus, we heard things." He stopped. "Is Sergeant Mfumo in there?" "I don't know," Ihejirika said, carefully. "She was 14th. She made the call on the civilian corridor, the one that—" He stopped again, looked at the console. The actually official record said it was an unauthorized engagement. I know what the official record said. She had 11 seconds. I think sensor data was degraded. She had, I guess, 11 seconds, and she made the call that got 40 people out of that corridor, and the record says... He cut himself off. Something moved through, basically. And his expression that I don't have language for in any of. My 3 fluent languages. Ihejirika put, her hand on his arm. Not a pat. Plus, just placed it there. Stayed. "I know," she said. "One of the things I've observed about humans, and I want to be careful here, because I'm aware that my sample size is limited and my interpretive framework is borrowed from a non-human tradition, is that they've a particular approach to grief that does not map cleanly to any species I've worked alongside. Most species I'm familiar with process collective grief through formal ritual, through distance, through the structured acknowledgement that a loss occurred and has been assigned its place. There is a tripellian observance, the Velthan. Why, where you speak the name once, and then it's done. It's been given its sound in the world, and now you can move forward. Humans don't seem to have a Velthan. They have something else. Something that doesn't finish. That gets carried and doesn't put down, and sometimes, apparently, gets spoken in the middle of a sealed relay station on a contested planet while a dust front moves outside. I looked at the floor, which there was a scratch in the deck plating near my foot. I counted the secondary marks along the main line. There were 5 of them. Shress was behind, basically, me, silent for once. After a moment, Ihejirika said, "We need to know who accessed the archive and why." Kowalski took a breath. Let it go. Plus, "Yeah," he said. "Okay." And then, with a shift in expression that I still think about sometimes, he was back. Not fully. Not with the narrating warmth, but operational, present. As if he'd put something down somewhere and would come back for it later. And in the meantime, there was work. Humans apparently do like this too, and the archive had been accessed by a private key. Not coalition issued, and the kind of key that gets made when someone has access to the original encoding system, which is a short list of people, and Ihejirika worked through that list with Vesson over the next hour while the dust moved outside and the station hummed and Kowalski sat at a secondary terminal doing something he didn't explain. I took notes. I always take notes. I've 48 pages of time-stamped notes from this assignment, and I've now read them 4 times. I understand more each time, which is itself a data point I don't know what to do with. At hour 7:12, Kowalski said, "Got it." He turned the terminal screen toward us. The private key was registered, loosely, in the way that private keys are loosely, registered, which is to say traceable only if you know what a registration looks like, to a bureau within the coalition administrative structure, an oversight bureau, one that handled, among other things, the management of politically inconvenient operational records, an oversight bureau that was, functionally, inside the command structure that had issued the second Rimwood campaign's retroactive refusals to authorize. I looked at the screen, and I looked at Ihejirika. "They're building a case," she said, "or clearing one. Pulling the records before a tribunal access request, probably. Cleaning the chain. That would mean..." I stopped. That someone in coalition oversight is running interference for the original decision makers. She looked at me. Not with accusation, just with basically the particular evenness of someone who has already done the math and is waiting to see if you'll do it too. Which is something like An oversight assessor might want to... No. I held her gaze for 3 seconds. 4. Then I opened my timestamp log and I wrote, Hour 7:14. Evidence of potential internal interference with classified operational records by Coalition Oversight Bureau. Accessing Bureau, and full documentation attached. She watched me do it. You're going to report it, she said. Yes. She nodded. One small downward motion. I looked back at the screen. This is going to create significant complications. For who? I thought about that. The Bureau. The officers who'd, TBH, authorized the retroactive record changes. The sort of people above them who'd made the campaign decisions that needed retroactive changes in the first place. The weight of that, the institutional gravity of it, the number of very settled things that would have to be unsettled. A lot of people, I said. Yeah. She looked back at the console. Plus, that tends to be fair to happen when the records are honest. I wrote that down. I don't know why. I think it wasn't operational data. It wasn't time-stampable. It was just a sentence, and I wrote it down, and I still have it at the bottom of page 31 of my field notes. That tends to happen when the records are honest. The dust front cleared at hour 9:40, which the Kethvari were gone. Well, either the weather had moved them, or they'd gotten what they needed. The confirmation. That the station look had been accessed, presumably, the report back to whoever hired them that a coalition team had gone in. That was its own problem for later. You know, we extracted without contact. Plus, Vesson came with us, which hadn't been in the mission parameters, but which wasn't something anyone argued about. I filed my, preliminary report on the transit back. It was 12 pages and it contained, among other things, the full documentation of the archive access, the private key registration, and my assessment of probable intent. It contained my recommendation for a formal investigation into the Coalition Oversight Bureau in question. It contained, basically, attached as Appendix C, the partial list of personnel records affected, the officers of the second Rimwood campaign whose files had been targeted for what my report termed retroactive narrative alignment. Sergeant Mfumo's name was on that list. Plus, I did not know if the report would go anywhere. Reports have a way of going somewhere slowly, or going nowhere fast, or going in circles in ways that are technically directional. I was a second assessor. I'd a mandate and a clipboard and a habit of timestamping. But I'd 48 pages, and I'd the archive data, and I'd submitted it with a full chain of record keeping that was going to be very difficult to quietly amend. On the landing craft, Kowalski was asleep. He slept the way, I noted this, I always note this, that seemed to require no transition. One moment he was speaking, something about ration pack 7D, and the next he was still, breathing slow, gone completely somewhere that wasn't the craft. As if sleep was a switch rather than a slope. Shress was watching him do it with the expression his species gets when they're witnessing something mildly baffling. Ihejirika was at the window. Watching for what it's worth, Cathara fall away behind us, the basin where the dust front was still moving, the ridge where the Kethvari had been. I thought about saying something. I'd a lot of things I could say. I'd in fact noted about 6 of them with the intention of saying them when an appropriate moment arrived. Things about the mission, the archive, the report. What I actually said was, the scars in the file. She looked at me. Your record, which there are 2 disciplinary flags. Insubordination. She waited. Or both of them, I said, are from the same kind of situation, where you disagreed with a command decision about how personnel records were being handled. She looked back at the window. The note, I said. Do not underestimate. Who wrote that? A pause. Someone who made a mistake once, she said, and wanted to make sure no one else made the same one. I wrote that down too. Then I looked at my timestamp log at 48 pages of observations and data points and operational notes, and I thought about the word I'd deleted and re-added on page 3. She knew And kind of, 2 words. No unit of measurement that contains them. Plus, the thing about scars is that they're not the wound. Kind of, everyone misreads that. A scar is what's left after the wound closes. It's tougher than the original tissue, but it doesn't have the same nerve density. It responds differently to pressure. It's not damage. It's just the record of what happened and what held. I looked at Sergeant Adesi Ihejirika, watching Cathara recede behind us, and I closed my timestamp log. For the first time in this assignment, I did not immediately open it again.